In a recent video we did here at Tech Yes City, we uploaded a custom install of Windows 10, which essentially just cuts out all the bloatware and all the telemetry. And we wanted now in today's video to show you guys the performance results with our version that we made, and I'll put the link to that video up here if you guys want to check out what we did, as well as how you can make your own custom install of Windows 10. But we are also going to compare it to a very popular version that's making the rounds, at least in my comment section and from when people message me directly, and that is the Ghost Specter version of Windows 10. More specifically, their super light version. And then lastly, we are going to be comparing these two versions to the default Windows 10 install with all its extra stuff, which, let's face it, a lot of us do not need. When we've done the initial tests, we've seen that RAM utilization and CPU overhead do decrease a little bit, at least on the default desktop monitoring, where you can see your RAM utilization with the default Windows 10 using up the most, and then followed by our version using significantly less, and then the Ghost Specter using even less than that. Though it's time to move on now to the biggest question, and that is, do these custom versions of Windows affect your gaming FPS? And is there more to gain if you use one of these installs? Let's find out right after this sponsor spot. Today's video is brought to you by AMD Radeon and Gigabyte with their RX 6700 XT gaming OC WindForce, sporting 3 fans out of the box with a quiet fan profile that's customized for higher FPS and also quieter noise over that of the reference design. It also comes with a clean aesthetic and a metal backplate for those who want quality. Though if you're after even more quality, especially in terms of the aesthetics, then you can go for the Aorus Elite, which also carries 3 neon punk RGB ring fans, perfect for vertically mounting and showing off your PC hardware. Links in description below to find out more. So the first thing to go over is the rigs used in today's comparisons, where we've got one on the lower end and then one on the extreme high end to check for the differences, where our low end rig consists of an x58 system with a 6-core 12-threaded Xeon, the x5675. We've also got 8 GB of RAM in a non-desirable configuration. That is, we're only using dual channel with 8 GB of DDR3 instead of triple channel, which is what this platform can enable. And we're also not overclocking the CPU in this instance, and that's because we want to get a representation for most people who are putting together low-end rigs to see what difference they can extract on an extreme budget, and especially if you can't afford an overclockable motherboard and extra things like a high-end cooler. Though on the high-end side of things, if you've got a lot of money, especially in the world of crypto, then you can afford an RTX 3090, for example. We'll take a look at that too with a Ryzen 9 5950X 16-core 32-threaded CPU, 32 GB of CL16 3600 memory, which is pretty much the best of the best when it comes to gaming. But let's move over to those results, where first up is GTA 5. And here on the low-end system, when we tested this game on the same settings, and this is the normal settings preset, which is pretty much the lowest settings in this game, at 1080p, we can see here at the same spot, so we're testing apples to apples to apples, we see here that both the Ghost Specter and the TYC version got really good 1% and 0.1% lows, and pretty much double that of the default version, and we also got an extra 2 average FPS. Now on the high-end system, we didn't really notice much of a difference here, except again with the 0.1% lows were a bit better on our TYC and Ghost Specter editions. The move to For Honor, here on the low end side, we did see a little bit of an uplift on average FPS, and then on the high end rig, we actually didn't see much of a difference at all, except when it came to those 0.1% lows, just like GTA 5. Though, moving over now to F1 2020, and here's where we saw, at least on the low end rig, in terms of average FPS, we got the biggest uplift in terms of percentage terms in this whole comparison, going from 77 to 81 and 82 respectively. So there was a bit more average FPS to be gained here, as well as the 0.1% and 1% lows going up pretty much in tandem to that of the average FPS. Then going over to the high-end system on the 5950X, we didn't really see much of an uplift here at all across either the 1%, 0.1% lows, or the average FPS. Keep in mind, this is a DX12 game, and the game is very well optimized for PC. Moving on now to the last title, and this is CSGO. And here we got on the potato system a slight increase of average FPS, and this went from 241 to 245 on both the Ghost Specter and TYC installs. However, the biggest difference here is that in CSGO's inbuilt benchmark, it doesn't just show the average FPS, it also shows the minimum. And we're not talking about minimum FPS, we're talking about actual minimum, and that is the worst frame transition possible in this benchmark. And here we went from 13 to 19 to 20. So you can kind of think of this as like if we're going to compare it to the 1%, 0.1% lows. In this particular benchmark, you could think of it like the 0.001% low. Essentially the worst transition possible. Though moving on to the higher end systems, we didn't see much of a difference at all, going from 26 to 27 to 29 on that minimum number, and then the average FPS showed a very minimal difference. However, one thing I will point out, and this is before we get on to the synthetic benchmarks, where we've done an additional 3 tests there. If you are on an AMD system, you want to keep the Spectre and Meltdown options enabled, as opposed to the Intel systems where I actually disabled them personally. However, in the custom version that we uploaded a few days ago here at Tech Yes City, we've left that on by default. So if you're on an older Intel system, I do recommend, this is what I do personally, I do disable Spectre and Meltdown, but if I'm on an AMD system, I do leave these enabled, which is the default setting, because if you disable the Spectre update, I'll pull up the results for you, you then go from over 800 FPS and pretty much lose 100 FPS. Though as for synthetics, we got here first up Firestrike, where we've got the physics scores on the potatoes, scoring a difference between the default and the custom versions here, which was a slight uptick to the custom versions, especially when it came to the CPU scores. And then when it came to the GPU scores, they also lifted up just ever so slightly. It was nothing to go outside and go celebrate and go party over, but it was a difference nonetheless. And then moving on to the high-end system, we also saw pretty much a similar result where the custom versions were beating out that of the default version. Though moving on now to Geekbench 5, and here's where I saw the most interesting result that sort of correlates with Cinebench, and that is that the Ghost Specter version consistently, when I was running these tests, was scoring ever so slightly higher on the single-threaded score, but then it was slightly losing out on the multi-core score. And this was showing on both the low-end and the high-end systems. And then when we move over to Cinebench, here we've got a similar trend developing where the single core was best on the Ghost Specter on both the low end and the high end systems, and then on the multi-core it was falling ever so slightly behind. Though with all those benchmarks out of the way, we're now at a conclusion for you guys, and what I saw there was something that when it comes to these custom Windows installs, what they're going to do is they're going to give you a smoother gaming experience. That's the trend that I saw across the board. Whether it's our version or it's the Ghost Specter version, I think both these versions do a better job at giving you better 1%, especially 0.1% lows than the default version, which has a lot of extra stuff baked in. And one thing that I have noticed as well is that when I'm first installing this, once we personally take out all the crap, and so does the Ghost Specter version, when you install these versions, you've just got a better experience on a low-end system in terms of things operating a little bit faster, especially if you're not, for instance, using an SSD. Then it's crucial that you get one of these lighter installs installed ASAP. So when it comes to getting better FPS, the two most important contributing factors are going to still be your GPU and your CPU. Though that being said, when it comes to competitive multiplayer titles, you definitely want to have a good 1% and 0.1% low, especially if you're in clutch plays. For instance, if I play Dota 2 and I'm in a big team fight, I do not want any stuttering while that's happening, because it could cost me the match and subsequently cost me the game. So if you're playing competitive multiplayer titles, then you definitely want to get on a custom version of Windows. That's just my 2 cents in that regard. So in a nutshell, both these two versions of Windows, they will make a difference, but in maybe a different way than you might have expected. The final question you guys probably have, and one that I get asked quite a lot, is the Ghost Specter version safe? If you install this, are you going to get hacked? And we've used it here for a couple of weeks, and from what I've seen, it looks very well polished, and the person who made it has spent a lot of time designing this, not just after you install Windows, but even before, where they've installed things like a custom UI on the installation screen. So I don't think it would be invasive. But that being said, I cannot put my name on it 100%. I'm not a network analysis expert. If you wanted to get a definitive answer, you'd have to find someone who is in that role, and they are a third party and they can vouch for it. So I'm pretty much not your guy for that. But when it comes to our version, I can tell you we've also spent a couple of weeks making this. It's been in the works, and I've been around for 10 years plus on YouTube, and I haven't been involved in any scandals. So basically, we're just happy to help you guys, and I'm pretty sure Ghost Specter is going to be one of those guys who's going to be happy to help out the community when it comes to getting a better gaming experience and also a better overall user experience too. So hopefully that answers that question. And if you guys have stayed this far and you're enjoying that Tech Yes content, be sure to hit that like button for us. Also, let us know in the comment section below, is there any questions or sort of feedback you have for our versions, other versions out there, as well as any tips and tricks of your own related to the Windows 10 custom installs. We were getting into it, and I must say it's a lot of fun, and I do enjoy this kind of stuff. So thanks for the suggestions. You guys are rocking as always, just like this question of the day here, which comes from SD1 Rager, and they ask, question of the day, who do you want to call? Yes, man. I'll tell you who I want to call, and that is hit that sub button, ring that bell, and peace out for now. Bye, Man Buster.